Welcome once again to Lehto's Law. Here's Steve Lehto.
Whole bunch of people sent me the story out of California from BusinessInsider.com. I'll mention them all at the end. Mary Meisenzahl wrote it. A California couple bought a home over a year ago, but because of a legal loophole, the previous owner refuses to leave. And it is exactly what you think. They sat down at a closing and they sold a house. Someone bought a house, they got up and left, but the people who sold the house go, oh, by the way, we're not going to get out of the house because of COVID. We're going to stay here. Couple bought a home in Riverside, California in January of 2020. A year later, they have not been able to move in because the sellers won't move out. Also reported by Fox 11 LA. The couple bought the four-bedroom home in cash for the asking price of $560,000. Their real estate agent told Fox 11. After the sale happened, though, the seller refused to turn over the keys or leave the home, the agent said. Quote is, "It's genuinely unfathomable to me that we live in a state where something like this is even possible." They closed escrow on this home January 31st, 2020. Couple closed in the house weeks before the state-mandated lockdowns and other measures were enacted to deal with the coronavirus pandemic. So later on, there was a moratorium on evictions. But that's not what this would be. The people sold the house. It's not their house anymore. At this point, they're squatters. And they're also in breach of contract. We'll get to that in a second. Meantime, California Governor Gavin Newsom signed a bill extending the state's eviction moratorium through June 30th, 2021. The couple and the real estate agent say they've tried to get the seller evicted, but authorities say their hands are tied. But again, they're treating it like an eviction. I understand the courts might treat it like an eviction also. But this is not going to end well, I don't think, for the sellers here, the same way it would for a typical tenant in a landlord-tenant situation. The buyer of the house says they have this case under a COVID tenant situation of no evictions when it doesn't fall under that at all. This transaction went through in January 2020. Before any of that, it isn't a renter who is getting thrown out. It's the guy who collected all of this money. The previous owner, who is allegedly still living in the house, did not come to the door when a Fox 11 reporter sought comment. This year alone, we've handled at least 7, maybe 8 cases of this exact type of situation, an attorney named Dennis Block said. So apparently this is not an isolated incident, as we say. California is notorious for a housing shortage, and the pandemic's only made things worse. Evictions have been paused in many parts of the country, but some moratoriums have already been lifted. In some cases, they are insufficient to protect the people they're intended for. CBS 8 has reported on cases in California bound by the same laws as Riverside, where landlords are finding loopholes to evict renters. So in some cases where the laws are on the books, people have found loopholes to get the people out. And here we have a situation where it's not even a renter, but they can't get kicked out because they claim to be a renter. And I have in my life managed to purchase real estate before. Stop the presses. And it's been a while since I've sat down and read all the documents they ask you to read at a closing. And it's always funny because when I am sitting down with a client reviewing a contract or a settlement agreement or something, I'll go through it with them. And I will have read it every single word. And I've had clients before who want to sit down and read every single, knock yourself out. If you want to do that, do that. In fact, I encourage you to do that if it'll give you peace of mind. But there are people out there who say, you know something, I haven't got time to read all this. Give me the short version. And I'll tell them, this paragraph says this paragraph says this, and I'll summarize it. The funny thing is, I've been to closings before where a closing agent didn't know that I was an attorney and starts telling me stuff, and I don't mind them summarizing it in plain English, but I've had them dumb it down to the point where I've actually said, well, isn't it true it actually does this? And they look at me and they go, oh, yeah, actually, you're right. It does do that. And then I'll often just say, and not as a threat, but just simply as a point of enlightenment, I'll say, I'm an attorney, so, maybe we can, okay. And if somebody knows they're speaking to somebody who understands the language, they can shift gears and usually do that. But when you're at a closing and you're signing all kinds of documents, everything in there, millions of documents. Who knows what half of them are? Some of them are required by federal, some are required by state, some are required by the lender. Some of them conflict with each other. I mean, seriously. And so there's all these documents in there. Now, I've never bought real estate in California, but I've bought real estate in Michigan. And I wouldn't be surprised if it's similar. Now, if anybody out there has bought real estate in California and can weigh in on what I'm about to say, please do so in the comments below. Because when I've bought or sold real estate, I've actually done both. When I bought or sold real estate, there's always been a clause in there that says that the buyer can take possession of the premises on this date. And then it says, if the seller has not vacated by that date, then they owe money to the buyer so much per day. Now, some people are going to say, but Steve, isn't that rent? No, it's actually more of a penalty clause. It's more of a penalty clause. It's not rent. It's not designed to create a landlord-tenant relationship. It's designed to encourage those people to get out. So my curious mind asks, if the people here in Riverside had that clause in their contract, if these people are racking up penalty every single day they stay, because they may have thought, oh, we're getting a freebie out of this. But go back and read the contract, see what you owe per day. Because we all know, and we've talked about this many times before, about how one of the side effects that's going to come about because of COVID legally is that there are people right now who haven't paid rent in a year because they couldn't be evicted. They knew it. They stopped paying rent. They couldn't pay rent, whatever it is. They haven't paid rent in a year. And at the end of the moratorium, when the landlord can evict them, the landlords are going to evict them and quite possibly seek money damages for unpaid rent. So there's going to be a lot of people out there getting hit with bills for unpaid rent. So that's going to happen. But the people here are going to be able to go into court and say, we had these people squatting in our house after they sold it to us, after they'd signed a contract saying they would vacate by one date, and for every day they stayed over, they're going to owe us money. And so they owe us that money. And they're not going to get the same sympathy from a court that a tenant would get, because a tenant can come in there and say, hey, look, I had no place to go. COVID hit me like it hit everybody else. Couldn't pay the rent. So, I go ahead and slap a judgment on me, but we'll see what happens. Here, we know these people got handed $560,000 in cash. Now, they may have spent it all now. I don't know. They may have owed that all to a bank. That's possible also. But if I was a judge and these people are in front of me, and if it says you're going to owe a couple $100 a day till you get out, times 365, you might get hit for a judgment for that. And at one point, you had $560,000. So they're not going to skate on this. Now, the bigger story, of course, here is that someone buys a house, they plan on moving into it, and they couldn't move into it for a year. So they've had to cover, that's what we call it in the legal terms, they have had to cover this elsewhere, meaning they've had to stay someplace else, and they've had to incur rent. Guess what? They can sue these people for that also. So it's a weird story all the way around, and I'm certain that some people heard the story and said, wait a second, what a brilliant idea. You sell your home, you stay there, you can't be evicted because of the moratorium, and then at the end of the moratorium, you just get up and walk out and you leave. Oh, no. It ain't that easy, because when they walk out and leave, they're going to get hit with a lawsuit for breach of the contract, because the contract said you're going to turn the house over to us on this particular day. They didn't do that. You're going to owe us money for every day you stay over, and you owe us for having to cover and stay someplace else. So at the end of this moratorium, if these people play their cards right, they can nail the sellers and get a big judgment against them. Again, I know people want to say, Steve, can you collect a judgment? Well, you're asking to collect a judgment against somebody at one point in time had $560,000 in cash handed to them. And it wasn't that long ago they had that cash. So it'll be interesting to see what happens at this point, but it's a crazy story. Business Insider published it. Mary Meisenzahl wrote it, and it was sent to me by a whole host of people, including Joseph, Jason, Nathan, Oscar, Troy, Robert, and Wayne. Thank you very much, and I will update you when I hear what happens on this one. Questions or comments, put them below. Let's talk to you later. Bye-bye.
Thank you for watching Lehto's Law. If you can't dazzle them with brilliance, baffle them with bull.